Good morning. I trust everyone had a wonderful weekend. I am going to ask Representative Williams if he will open us in prayer, and I would, on a personal note, I would like for y'all to remember Rick Jaspers. His father passed away, and they're going to bury him this afternoon late, and y'all keep him in your prayers. Mr. Williams. Amen. In case God has something to do with this, we got 6 days, not 5. Buck Dixon. Raise your hand. Leah Barnett. Raise your hand. Stand up. Tell us what you did this weekend. Leah, you can give him the ring back. Y'all give a congratulations. They got engaged. Now, as I look on the wall, if y'all got something to top that, you can get in the well. If you hadn't, see you. All right, Ms. Unterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I bring before you on the first page modified open rule, 3 bills down, Senate Bill 291 and Senate Bill 292. We've talked about these bills before. They originated out of the Alzheimer's Task Force, a 75-member task force that's been all over the state of Georgia. The first one is reorganizing the Department of Adult and Aging Services to make it more efficient and effective to deal with the aging baby boomers and the increased population. The second one, Senate Bill 292, the Alzheimer's Disease Registry, is a statistical data registry, unlike other data registries that we have in the state that will track Alzheimer's and related dementia Georgians.
Any questions of those two? No questions. You want to do the resolutions, or
Excuse
did you
me?
do the resolutions?
Do I have a resolution?
You got 2 of them.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a Monday morning. Where are they? The very top of the page. Oh, yes, sir. Those are also related to this task force. Senate Resolution 746 just expresses support for the state plan. It's an 18-month plan, and it'll be ready for next year for 2015. It just expresses support for it. And Senate Resolution 828 is a little bit different. This is resulting from the case that we had up in Commerce, Georgia, of where DCH is having to go in and look at facilities that have infractions or possibly closure, and we'd like to create a study committee so we have a sufficient plan to be able to take care of these people that need to be relocated.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much for pointing that out.
You've been here more than anybody. You don't have to come back anymore.
Thank you
Mr. Harbison, y'all pay a lot of attention to this gentleman.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you very much, and I'd like to apologize first of all.
I'm not through.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pardon me. I'm sorry. I have a problem hearing, so I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead.
Mr. Harbison, are you still a Marine?
Yes, always a Marine, sir.
Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
You people out here, you think his bill's not going on?
Semper Fi, do or die. That's right.
Now your time.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I know how to keep my feet on the yellow footprint, so at Paris Island, I learned that, so I apologize. But I appear today, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, to ask for Senate Bill 320. That is the Veterans Court bill that we worked with very diligently over the summer with Chairman Wanda Willard and members of the task force. We ask your favorable consideration.
There are no questions.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody want to move on that one right now? Thank you. And then next is my favorite senator. I wonder if he has a chance of getting a bill on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The top of page 2, the first bill there is Senate Bill 288. This bill would drive accountability and transparency for sanctioning bodies of extracurricular activities for our public schools by requiring them to provide member schools with an annual financial report. It also, now having passed the Senate, includes a joint oversight committee that used to exist between the House and the Senate for high school athletics in Georgia, and the current language mirrors the language that had expired.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tolleson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to be with y'all today. On the first page, the modified open rule, you have Senate Bill 333. Y'all have passed a House bill out, exactly the same that I'm going to carry over in the Senate. Representative McCall is going to carry this bill for me over here. And basically, it just gives, if you got a piece of property gets put in the environmental I'm sorry, I just went brain dead for a moment. I think it's that pot of coffee that got me this morning.
You want to swap seats?
Anyway, yeah. Anyway, it gives you the right for a hearing, which you don't have that right now. It's a simple bill, but it does give a right to the landowner. And then also on that same modified open rules on the first page, Senate Resolution 896. It's a joint study committee with the House and the Senate, looking at the Georgia Legacy Program, and Chair Lady Smith is going to carry that for me. And then on the back page, on page 2, Senate Bill 296, that's the Jekyll Island bill, and y'all have passed a Jekyll Island bill that I'm going to carry in the Senate for Representative Hamilton. He's going to carry my bill in the House. And then I got one little bill that got out of Ag Committee this morning. You may have heard about that bill, Senate Bill 213. That'll be coming to you, and we'd like to get that moved on for the people of Southwest Georgia so they can stay in business. And that's it, Mr. Chairman.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. On the back page under Structured Rules, Senate Bill 353. This is a cleanup bill that clarifies language for development authorities around the state. Basically what this does is clarifies the language with what kind of projects city and county development authorities can undertake, and it really deals with motels and hotels not having to have a convention center. That's the section 1. And then in section 4, it deals with bond validation hearings and not having a district attorney present at the bond validation hearings. And I would appreciate your support of SB 353.
y'all hold on a second. Mr. Golick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, what is the potential net effect on local taxation from this bill? And specifically, I'm wondering, do any of the sections of this, any of the provisions of this bill provide for an exception to taxation that doesn't otherwise, local taxation that doesn't otherwise exist right now?
Well, I think that's up to the Development Authority, but it does allow hotels and motels to be tax exempt if the bonds so be.
Why?
It's very similar to the Brave Stadium. It's owned by that sports authority, the Atlanta Fulton County Development Authority. The Braves do a 20-year lease, and the Development Authority doesn't pay taxes on Turner Field. So it's very similar.
Let me ask you a follow-up question. This goes to on line 100 in the very end of the bill. Just looking at it, in no event the appeal is filed or the judgment is affirmed on appeal, why do we have the language that says that the validating issuance of bonds on line 102 shall be forever conclusive against the governmental body? Does that preclude an issue, the court being unable to reopen it should there be an issue later?
Yeah, I think after 30 days, you have 30 days to appeal, and then that's it.
Why would we not, in case there was an issue later on after the appeal or after the Superior Court acted, why would we not want to give that ability to reopen if an issue arises that didn't arise at the time? Forever conclusive.
Yeah.
I mean, when I see the word forever,
I see your point. Yeah.
you know, it gives me a little pause.
Yeah. I mean, I see your point, but, you know, we felt like 30 days they had a chance to appeal, and it's been vetted and so on.
Just one other question. On line 93, it says that the DA or the AG shall not be required. And I understand that as a practical matter, and I don't do this kind of work, but my understanding is that it's rare that the DA or the Attorney General shows up in these hearings. I understand that. The problem comes in that then you have the Development Authority bearing the burden of making the case for the validation. Aren't they the opposite party? So you'd have the Development Authority acting as on both sides of the issue. Is that a correct statement?
That could, yeah, I could see how that could be a correct statement.
Would that be a conflict?
It could be, yes, I see your point there.
Okay. Thank you, I appreciate
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the bill has the potential of being a very strong economic development bill. But as evidence of some of the questions, there are some folks who want to make some additional possible tweaks to this, and therefore at the appropriate time, I'd like to make the motion to have the bill be sent back to economic development.
Okay, Mr. Setzler.
To Senator Beach, Mr. Chairman, what's the nature of the? I've been getting some calls from some school board folks about this bill.
What is
the interest in school? Why would they be?
Doesn't affect school boards. Does not.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Willard. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put Mr. Lindsay's motion up there. He's got a motion to send it back to committee. Do I hear a second? Any opposition? It's back to committee.
Thank you.
Mr. Albers.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Beginning in the modified open rules, Senate Bill 235. This relates to Georgia firefighters, for specifically part-timers, to correct an error that was made by the pension fund administrator several years ago. It will help the 18 folks who had paid into and were promised in that system to continue with it, as well as moving forward, those who work more than 1,000 and 24 hours will be eligible for the pension fund. To note for the committee that this is not taxpayer funds. It's paid into by the firefighters themselves and insurance companies.
No questions. Next.
Senate Bill 325. This is an agency bill from our Insurance and Fire Commissioner's Office, and it regulates the penalties for those who put in sprinkler and extinguisher systems to assure that we do a few things. The first is that they are certified, and if they operate without a license, that they can take action. The second part of that bill is those who are have found to have a problem, the fire marshal will give them a written warning and give them a chance to fix that without giving them a fine, so it's good for our small businesses. And last but not least, if someone goes to apply for a new license but have been committing dishonest acts along the way, that could be reason to deny them a license had they been trying to go around the system.
Mr. Rice.
Senator, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I noticed in that bill there are at least two provisions in there that allow the commissioner to sue for civil penalties against these applicants. Can you explain that? I'm not sure I understood why that was in there.
It actually makes it consistent, Mr. Representative, with other areas of the language, and if the contractor, if you will, had put in those systems and those systems were not certified properly because they were not authorized to do so in the beginning, then they may have caused great cost to the business owner and to the fire commissioner's office for all the work they'll do to have to extract that information or those sprinkler systems and extinguishers and put them back in. So that was his reasoning for that.
Thank you. No more
Last
questions.
one on the second page, bottom, Senate Resolution 868. This is from the State Properties Agency. This is their annual easements bill. All the representatives and all the senators who are affected have had meetings and conversations, and I believe at this point are in agreement.
Yeah, I had mine this morning. No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring to you today SB 286 at the bottom of the page under modified structured rule. What this bill does is it's an economic development bill that helps our Georgia wineries. Currently, Georgia wineries can get their wine fortified. They can have it fortified to make port wine or to make brandy. You know, that's fortification is increasing the alcohol in the product so they can make those. The problem is, and I don't know where this came from, they have to send that out of state to do that. Georgia does not allow them to use their own distilleries in Georgia to fortify their wines. So this bill corrects that, something that we just became aware of last year. It also increases the alcohol content from 21% to 24%, which brings it into the federal guidelines. And that's the two things that the bill does, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, but it's going to help our Georgia wineries. And it's kind of crazy that they will send it, that we're requiring them to send the product out of the state, sending revenue and taxes out of the state. Appreciate your favorable approval.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good morning. I want to draw your attention down at the bottom of the page to Modified Structural Rules, Senate Bill 240. This is a bill to allow the Atlanta History Center to have a still on site so that the Smith family farm experience is a more authentic experience. We learned from Mount Vernon up in Washington, D.C. that this was a good idea.
How many times have you been up here?
It's my first time, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, what a shame.
This year.
Oh, that don't matter. First, sounds like first. Next bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You got another one?
Well, I didn't want to ask for too much my first time.
Good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, if you look on the modified open rule, close to the bottom is Senate Resolution 847. What this allows DNR to add a structure at Panola State Park and to move some employees there and save rent money that they're paying in Atlanta.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Stone.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I have 3 bills today, 2 under modified open rule. SB 339 is just a reviser bill dealing with retirement, just changes and corrects errors. SB 341 deals with probate courts, allowing for all probate courts to do what the larger courts already authorized, and that is to delegate uncontested matters to chief deputy clerks or attorneys with certain experience periods required. That will help the public, add convenience to the public and help out the courts. And the last bill is under modified structured on page 2 is SB 332. This is brought by the Magistrate Courts Council. All it does is bring the magistrate courts in line with other courts of similar stature, probate, municipal courts, as to the ability to assess for contempt of court. It raises it to $500, which would be even with the other courts that I mentioned. Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Under modified structure.
Let me do this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Miller.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Under modified structure, first bill, SB 95. This deals with making the CEO of DeKalb County a nonpartisan race. I've got a legislative opinion that says it just applies to DeKalb County, but in the abundance of caution, Chairman Hamilton added an amendment that further restricted it when the CEO is not a member of the Board of Commissioners. So it's absolutely, without any doubt, just applies to DeKalb, number 1. Second part of the provision, Chairman Jacobs added, as you know, we've had some issues in DeKalb, and we have an interim CEO, and he's also was a member of the Board of Commissioners, but unfortunately, he is not allowed to vote on commission business now. An opinion was given by the Attorney General that we need to deal with this. So Chairman Jacobs put together an amendment that basically said that we can replace the commissioner on an interim basis so that the 130,000 people in that district, District 5, will have representation and get votes on the Board of Commissioners. And that's what the amendment did. I'll be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Miller, is it not true that there is local legislation moving that addresses that District 5 issue?
I can't comment on that because I have not seen the local legislation. I'm not disputing it. There's nothing that I'm aware of in the Senate.
Can you speak to the concern that was raised that by allowing the person who has given up their seat to hand select their replacement, we are somehow undermining the democracy that should be allowed for the members of District 5? Under the terms of your bill, the person who has vacated that seat will be allowed to handpick his successor.
Well, he doesn't really. He nominates 3 people, and the other commissioners are the person that selects it. He doesn't vote on it.
But he alone selects the replacement.
Well, he selects three options, just like, well, quite honestly, he's probably the closest person to the people in that district, we hope, number one. And number two, we've let the governor replace people in DeKalb as well, so I don't know what else to tell you.
Is it not true that this is the only circumstance where we would allow the person being replaced to select a replacement? For example, using the governor's example, nominees were allowed to
Correct.
apply for that position. Why would we not allow people to apply for this position and allow the commissioners to select from among the folks who are applying?
I don't have a problem if you'd like to put an amendment on to do that. We'd have to change it, I guess, unless you did it in the Rules Committee because it's modified structure, but I have no problem with that.
Mr. Roberts.
Did Mr. Roberts want to apply for the job? Maybe I missed it.
Oscilla DeKalb. Did you fix your clock Saturday night? Were you sound but asleep right there just a second ago? Y'all, I can see your eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Carter.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you today Senate Bill 361 under modified open rule of the Georgia Geospatial Council that helps us make sure that all our maps in our state can speak to each other.
You know, that's about the best explanation you've given for this bill. Y'all, this thing's been going on for 2 years. Nobody knows what it is. Except him, and he just now figured out what it was. Any questions of Mr. Carter? Yes, that we do.
Thank you, Mr. I don't have a problem with the bill. Could you just explain why we need it so that us non-experts on this?
Right, because of the fact that at the current time, FEMA is doing remapping of all the floodplains in the state, and some of the maps don't match up to the county maps, so they're having trouble identifying the property owners.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Gooch.
Good morning. Mr. Chairman, I asked for Senate Bill 299. It's on the back sheet of your blue page. It's a bill that allows for local control of cities and counties dealing with watershed protection plans, and it would allow those counties and cities to submit those plans to the EPD for approval instead of a one-size-fits-all approach that we currently use.
Any questions? Wait a second. Pro Tem.
What is the, I mean, I've had a few emails about this. Could you just kind of quickly explain what the controversy, if any, is?
Anytime you open up the code section on stream buffers, there's controversy. The state law today has a 50-foot trout stream buffer in place and a 25-foot warm water buffer. This bill does not touch that at all. In fact, we referenced that code section in the bill to ensure the people who had concerns that we would not be reducing buffers below the trout stream buffer in Georgia. So most of the reservoirs that are built in Georgia are north of Macon. If you draw a line across the state from Macon north, there's 30 to 40 reservoirs and intakes that use surface water for drinking water supplies. The EPD requires a watershed protection plan, which basically consists of a 150-foot setback on both sides of any stream in Georgia in that watershed, up 7 miles north of the intake. In one particular case that I've used in committee testimony, the community where I live, there's 9,000 acres of land that's taken off any possible use of that property. It would be basically a regulatory taking without compensation. This bill allows for the cities and counties in those watersheds to put together a watershed protection plan that uses alternative methods of protecting the water other than just an arbitrary 300-foot setback. You're welcome.
Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you just confirm that you're really not Senator Chip Pearson, please?
Yes, sir. I am not Senator Chip Pearson, but he is a good friend of mine and yours, Mr. Hamilton.
No more questions.
Thank you, sir.
Members. Ms. Cooper. Ms. Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for H.R. 1332. It's just a study committee on how we need to go about compensating those persons who were wrongfully convicted.
Mr. Powell. Was Mr. Tippins here Friday? He was. I think he saw me this morning, told me he couldn't get here, so. Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to put my name to Senate Bill 333, Tollison's bill, the HISRA bill, and then Senate Resolution 896, Tollison's bill, also the Legacy Resolution Study Committee, and then Senate Bill 296, State Park, Tollison's bill. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name beside H.R. 1332, and as an old dog-faced soldier, as we always have to do, SB 320.
This is an Army?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Sims. Mr. Smiley.
Chairman, I'd like to put my name beside House Resolution 1332. And SB 320.
Okay. All right. This is for Tuesday. Under modified open, SB 320. Yeah, good move, everybody. Is anybody silly enough to oppose that? It's under modified structure, SB 288. Any opposition? It's on under modified structure, SB 296. Any opposition? You're carrying it for him. Mr. Hamilton, let me do it like this. I've put it on there. You are free to use whatever negotiating power you think that does to get the fellow that plays the music over there and tell him it needs to be on tomorrow too.
Mr. Chairman, what I'm saying is, Chairman Collison hasn't even moved mine out of his committee.
That would even be a finer thing to go see rather than the fellow up on the 4th floor. But I can promise you we can hold his bill. Okay. Modified open. HR 1332. Do I hear move? Any opposition? It's on. Modified open. SB 305. Do I hear move? Any opposition? It's on. Modified open. SB 325. Any opposition? Modified open. SB 333. It's on. Modified open. SR 847. It's any opposition? Modified open. SR 896. Any opposition? It's on. Modified structure. SB 240. Any opposition? It's on. Modified structure. SB 286. Any opposition? That's it.